Hi, folks. I'm Tony Ullrich, and this sequence is going to be some history of early melodic style banjo. Let me take the picks off here. I think that the best way and the most fun way I can pass on to you about a little history of what's called melodic style banjo is go to my record collection and use some actual vinyl albums that I think are of historical importance. And I'm going to begin here. The first one is an album from May of 1957, recorded in New York. Banjo player is an icon, Billy Faier. And Billy Faier is in his late 70s. He's still with us. And he lives out in West Texas in a little town called Marathon, Texas. This album has a melodic, what we know is melodic style banjo on it. One cut that comes to mind is one of my favorites, The Last of Callaghan. See if you can find a copy of this one. It's on Judson Records. Billy Faier, The Art of the Five-String Banjo, and this is my original album. You can tell by the tape. Okay, now the second album is called Banjos, Banjos, and More Banjos. Judson Records, May of 1957, New York City, and includes three banjo players, Dick Weissman, a Billy Faier, and a very young Eric Weissberg of Dueling Banjos and Deliverance fame. This has really got some really fine eclectic banjo on it, including some melodics. 1957, Banjos, Banjos, and More Banjos. Both of these first two albums were recorded in 1957 and contain melodic style banjo. The third album I just bring up because a lot of you have probably never seen this. This is my original copy of the Pete Seeger Banjo Instructor album. I'm not sure when this album was first produced, but I can tell you when I got this copy in the summer of 1960 at a record store in North Beach, California, a suburb of San Francisco. I was on a trip. My father had a business trip, and he took me along with him. We stayed at the Mark Hopkins, and he knew my interest in music, and he found this record store. Now, the reason I bring this up is the first two albums I've already shown you. The Art of the Five-String Banjo and Banjos, Banjos, and More Banjos. I bought all on the same day in that record store, North Beach, California, in the summer of 1960. So that was pretty much the really serious beginning place for me as far as listening to records, those three albums. Now, the next one is another iconic album. It's called New Dimensions in Banjo and Bluegrass. Now, I don't know the exact release date, but I bought this while I was in college in Lubbock at Texas Tech, and it would be about 1961 or 62. The album is really important in the history of bluegrass music, and on the cover you see three people. You see a little red-haired boy, and you see two banjo players looking down at them. Well, the banjo player closest to the little red-haired boy is Eric Weissberg. And the other fellow off to the right is one Marshall Brickman. Now, Marshall Brickman, as far as I know, is the only bluegrass banjo player to have ever won an Academy Award. Marshall Brickman was also a writer, and I believe in 1975 he won an Academy Award for having co-written with Woody Allen the screenplay for the movie Annie Hall. So the fellow who co-wrote the screenplay for the movie Annie Hall got an Academy Award for that screenplay. Marshall Brickman. Very important album. It's on, the original is on Elektra Records, if you can find it. Now, this next album is a continuity of Weissberg and Brickman. Eric Weissberg and the two African-American singers pictured in the cover here, Bob Carey and Clarence Cooper, made up the group the Tarriers. And they were, if you can find their original work, you'll really enjoy all of it, especially Eric's early banjo work. The other fellow in the picture sitting at the table is Marshall Brickman. So Marshall Brickman had joined the group, at least temporarily. This is a live album recorded at the Bitter End, Greenwich Village, New York City, somewhere early 60s, probably 62, 63. Very funny album. A lot of good humor on stage and more of their incredible banjo playing. Okay, this brings us up to about 1963. Next also is another Elektra album. This is called Folk Banjo Styles, and it has 4 banjo players on it. Tom Paley, Art Rosenbaum, and also Eric Weissberg and Marshall Brickman again. And there is one of their melodic versions of The Devil's Dream on this album. Melodic style banjo. This is about 62, 63 also. Next is the one and only Bill Keith, William Bradford Keith. I believe this is his first actual recorded music around, well, I know 1963, Livin' on the Mountain. It's on Prestige Folklore, and Jim Rooney and 3 other fellows were on the album with him. And this album has Bill's early first great melodic break to Salty Dog Blues on it, along with a medley of The Devil's Dream and the Sailor's Hornpipe that seems to go on forever and ever and ever, and I don't know how he did it. Bill Keith, William Bradford Keith. Now, I had Bill Keith down here in February in Houston. Let me put down here. I had Bill Keith down here in Houston, Texas, for my second banjo workshop that I produced in February of 1978. And I treasure those memories of that weekend where I produced a banjo workshop with Bill Keith. What a great gentleman, and what an honor to know him. A true icon. I don't like to use the word legend, because Bill is still very much alive and with us, but he is an icon, and I think probably a lot of you already know who Bill Keith is. This album, 1963, the liner notes were written by a lady named Linda Solomon, who happens to be the sister of Andy Solomon, who is a very close friend here in Houston. Andy and I have known each other since about 1974. Andy Solomon, notes by Linda Solomon. Very important album if you can find it. Next is Poor Richard's Almanac. Now, this is a reissue of an album that was recorded by my friend Alan Munde, Sam Bush, and a fellow named Wayne Stewart, Easter weekend in 1969. And they shopped, it was done, I think, on a 4-track tape recorder, and they shopped it around, and they found a record label way up in northwest part of the country. This is not the original album. This is a reissue from 1976, produced by Ridge Runner Records, the one and only Slim Richey. And I believe this is Alan Munde's, pretty much his first professional recordings. A lot of melodic style banjo. Alando mundo y conjunto. He'll know what that means. Alan Munde. Oh, I forgot something. Alan was my first banjo workshop. I had Alan down here in Houston, Texas in January of 1977. That was the first banjo workshop that I ever produced. 1977 was a long time ago. Alan Munde, Sam Bush, Wayne Stewart, Poor Richard's Almanac. See if you can find it. Carl Jackson. When I lived in Nashville from 68 through 70, I got to watch a lot of TV. And one Sunday morning on Jim and Jesse's television show, they brought in this young fella named Carl Jackson. And I believe the first thing I ever saw Carl play was Salt Creek. And it absolutely blew me away. And he was like 17 at the time. Carl Jackson had played with Glenn Campbell. And he is a world-class musician. And this was recorded during the time that he performed with Jim and Jesse. And wonderful melodic style banjo. And then finally is area code 615, which is Nashville. And this is a group of superstar young musicians, 1970, 71, 72, 73. And on this album is Bobby Thompson. Now, Bobby Thompson has passed on, and he was world class, and you can find his music on the internet, Bobby Thompson. Now, in case you don't know who Bobby Thompson was, let me tell you, because it's important. He played banjo on Loretta Lynn's Coal Miner's Daughter. He played the banjo on both Dottie West and Lynn Anderson's version of Rocky Top. And he was Nashville's #1 recording studio musician from probably the mid-60s until he became ill and had to stop playing. Wonderful, eclectic banjo music from Bobby Thompson. Lastly, if you watch Hee Haw or watch any repeats from Hee Haw, Bobby was the guy, the little short guy with the beard who always wore a hat, who played with the other stars of the television show. And he was one incredible banjo player, Bobby Thompson. Now that's all. What I've done here is I've given you a history, my own personal history of melodic style banjo, how it came through my life. And I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to, try to find the albums. I don't know if they're all been reissued or not. Vinyl era is gone, but we're still here. So, let's move on to the first series of melodic style banjo licks. And let's pick the banjo. I'm Tony Ullrich, Houston, Texas.